Hey guys, welcome back to what is the second part of Finding Freedom, although it's not the second session, it's the second part and what we're looking at. The last few weeks we've been looking at some basic truths, and in this part of Finding Freedom we're going to be looking at what deflects us from the truth. In this session we're going to be looking at worldviews and how we all look at the world through a different lens and we see it in a different way. But not all of the ways that we can view the world are God's way. But as usual, before we get started, we have an icebreaker. And the question this week is, you have to spend a week in a room, locked in, there's no windows, the only thing you have is obviously access to water and food, but also a mat to be sleeping on. You can either spend the week in total darkness or with the lights on for the whole time. Which would you rather?
So, I think I would choose for the lights to be on at all times.
Okay.
My prefer. If you had said a day, I would have said light off because I much prefer to be in the dark. However, a week, that's too long in my mind, and I think that. I know that something goes wrong in the human brain when you're just in pitch darkness for long periods of time. Like there's something mad about that. I think there's madness that comes from that, which I don't want to be partaking in. But I do know that there are people in, around the North Pole who for it's light 24 hours a day. And you just get used to it. And you can sleep with your eyes closed. Like facing down, so I think I'd choose that.
So I would choose the dark for a week. Interesting, the thing with the North Pole is though, you're not like confined to a space. You still, and you can see things. In this box you can't see trees and etc.
You just see a room.
I'm just having an internal wonder, are there trees at the North Pole? No.
No, not at the North Pole. No. Not at the North Pole, but like I'm thinking about like at the top of Iceland or something.
Yeah.
Maybe not Iceland. Which is the
irrelevant.
Yeah.
No, I would pick to be in the dark for a week because I think it would almost. I'm thinking about when you come out, and if you spent a week in the light, suddenly the night will seem way darker. But if I spent a week in the dark,
you'd be blinded.
Yeah, but I'd get over it, and suddenly the day I'd be like opened up to this brightness, and the night wouldn't seem as dark to me anymore, I don't think. Where I would rather be blinded and then have to get used to the light again than
I don't think that's how it would work.
Completely.
I don't think that you would because I think as soon as you go into the light, you would have lost your night vision pretty much because your eyes would be basically blinded.
Well, yeah, but that's fine. You lose the night vision. But in pitch black you're not going to gain any night vision because there is no light to give you any vision. But then it will almost be, for me, I imagine coming out of that and the day being so much more bright and the night suddenly becomes like, I'm chill. I can go for a walk in the night.
I do know what you mean because there are times when you get up in the middle of the night, you go for a wee,
you walk to the
bathroom with your eyes closed and you're like, you realise you get halfway and you're like, wait a minute, I can just do that and it makes no difference.
Oh no, I do it on purpose because I don't want the light to wake me up, so I keep my eyes shut on purpose.
Oh.
Not because I've forgotten I can open them.
Just me then,
No, if I woke up in the night to go to the loo, I'd keep my eyes shut because if I turn the bathroom light on, it's too bright and then I'm like...
I feel like we're going to have to do an Instagram poll of like...
Go to sleep it, yeah.
Do you close your eyes or not?
If I wake up in the night, I absolutely just have to put a light on. I keep my eyes shut.
I just realised we've never done Instagram polls of our icebreakers.
No.
We should do that.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, or maybe tonight, I don't know. There will be an Instagram poll of the icebreaker, and you can choose, would you rather be in a room in the light or in the dark?
Fair dues. But yeah.
Amazing.
Last week we asked you a question, and the question was, imagine that you were born in another country. Do you think the way you look at the world and your beliefs would be different? What do you think?
Yes.
Hmm. Having lived in another country
Yeah.
and seen different beliefs, I just know the answer
Yeah.
to that is yes, because the way I saw the world living in Durban and the way I saw the world in the UK do not fit together.
Yeah.
They are not the
And
same.
that's you being the same person.
Yeah.
But living in two different places, let alone having.
Even within the
grown up.
country though, having grown up in the north and now living in the south,
Oh
I have
yeah.
a completely different outlook on things.
No, definitely. I think, when I find that with whenever I go and travel. So I may not know, I do some work in Africa, and when I go over, I feel different. Like I find that I speak slightly different, or I'm relaxed in certain situations where probably if they happened in the UK I wouldn't be. But also, like, in terms of, I've met enough people to just know that yes, you would be very different. Like, cultures are different. In Middle Eastern cultures, you grow up within a lot more sort of honor shame culture, and or if you grow up without technology, or if you grow up with a language that works in different ways, or you grow up in a highly matriarchal society instead of a patriarchal society, all those things will change how you view people and life and decisions and God. And no, it's incredible. It's an incredible thought.
Yeah.
Well, so we all have these worldviews that we've been speaking about. Maybe just think about some of the ones that you have. Have you ever heard when someone says that someone's looking at the world in rose-tinted glasses? Basically what they mean there is that someone is a bit overly optimistic or unrealistic in what they see. They see the positives in everything. Let me just give a quick example of a high level of optimism. So a few years ago, a company called Kenner produced a child Batman costume. And on the cape, the following warning label was on: "Cape does not enable users to fly." Now, I think you'd have to be a pretty big optimist to think that just because you'd bought a piece of fabric, you could suddenly fly. But the fact is that we all look at the world in different ways, and we all have these different glasses, a bit like having what's they called?
VR.
Yeah. But we all look at the world in different ways. It's like we all have VR goggles on, showing us different things, and each of us have different goggles, so each of us look slightly different. And that way that we look at the world is called our worldview.
Yeah, so your worldview is like a filter. Everything that you see through this. Everything that you see, everything that happens around you put a filter on to work out what it means, whether you know you do that, whether it's a conscious thing or a subconscious thing. But no, how we all got our worldview completely depends on our past. Our worldview is shaped by past experiences. So, like, for me, for example, I grew up in the north. I grew up in me and Owen have very different upbringings, therefore we have completely different views of the world. There are certain things which sometimes Owen and my friends point out to me and say something, and I'm just like, oh, but I just thought that was how you do things, and what, because that's the view of the world that I've had because of how I've grown up. I think the best specific example is probably in the sense of when I was a child, if my parents weren't in and the phone rang or someone knocked at the door, you do not answer it. You do not answer the phone. You do not pick up. You don't open the door, and that led me to have a worldview of. Honestly, for a while I was like, anyone that tries to speak to me without my parents around is going to try and kidnap me, and that's obviously not true. Don't just go hanging out and speaking to strangers.
Yeah.
But also
there is both sides.
There's a line. But that shaped my view of the world. That shaped how then, when I was just walking to school, how I looked at people across the road. I was very cautious because that's just how I knew the world.
And when we had this conversation, I found that quite odd, because growing up, if the phone rang, it was rude not to answer it. You know, if you just left the phone ringing, then like that's quite rude. And so you'd always answer it. And I mean, you'd always check who was at the door before opening the door. If there was just a random person, you wouldn't open it. But if you knew it, then it wasn't a problem. Or if it was obviously a delivery driver, then that wasn't a problem. But yeah, no, the phone. But I think that's then shaped how I do things. I'm probably a bit more open about things. I'm better on phones as well. I've discovered this. I have quite a phone voice, don't I?
Yeah.
It's always Christchurch House Owen speaking, which Rob mocked me about when he arrived.
I still do.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, we're going to look at a couple of specific worldviews today. And the first one we're going to look at is a non-Western worldview, which to anyone, if you don't quite get, Western world is where we live, is the like America, United Kingdom, etc. A non-Western world would be looking more at places like Africa and just different lifestyles, really. So a non-Western worldview, through this set of glasses, there's a worldview called animism. It's held by a very large number of people throughout the world, and you'll find it in its purest form amongst tribal societies in developing countries. But the influences of this non-Western worldview stretch far beyond that and is common in many countries over the world across all sections of society. Most people that analyse this stuff believe in some kind of God, but what's really important to them is the view of spiritual power and how spiritual power is found in everything, animals, even vegetables, minerals, stuff around the world, and that there's a lot going on with spirit. Within the worldview, there's a certain kind of person that you would consider an expert in the spiritual. So, for example, there's people called shamans. You might have heard of medicine men or witch doctors. They're the people that you call on. Something's going wrong, you call on a shaman or a witch doctor or a medicine man, and they can help you with any kind of trouble that's happening. But also it's just the level of it's seen to involve this universal power or a spirit in some way. People often live in fear of evil spirits, or that spirits believe that spirits simply don't like them or want to hurt them. There's also the worry that your enemies might become spiritually superior to you and use their spiritual power against you.
Yeah, have you come across many of, in terms of within the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so like we had stuff. I lived in a township in Durban called in English Cottonlands, but it's actually known as Mhlabatini, and like we had witch doctors in the community because we were a Christian presence, but we weren't the whole community. It's a large base, and we had times that I worked in one of the factories on the village, and there was one of the ladies came to me, and she was like, "Oh, I've got an appointment with the witch doctor this evening because I can't remember what it was exactly. She was just having like struggle with her breathing, so she booked an appointment with the witch doctor." And then I was like, I immediately went to like my mentor, and I was like, someone needs to do something. Like, she's going to see a witch doctor about something that either a doctor could deal with, or maybe it's prayer that she needs, but a witch doctor is not the way. But so no, I've seen a lot of it. I have a friend called Ayanda who, he's a Christian now, but he grew up, his parents were witch doctors, and had he followed his family profession, he would have been a witch doctor as well. And so if you go across the world, you'll find that in lots of different areas. But as Robert said, that in that sort of Western, non-Western, within the West, in the last sort of 50 years ago, we've gone down a sort of slightly different path, and you see this different worldview. That, so for instance, you don't go out on the streets and find witch doctors, but you do go out and you find doctors and you find
psychiatrists, and you find all of these different things. And the Western worldview, pretty much summed up, is that everything has been scientifically proven, and the science behind can prove everything, and the spiritual side can't. So it's really the opposite direction of that animist one that we were talking about earlier. In the Western worldview, the spiritual world has no relation to normal everyday life. It shouldn't be taken seriously. God isn't put into the equation when it comes to situations. That's a personal thing with faith. And this means that it's not really included in education. Obviously, we study religions, but we don't, when we talk about supporting people, we don't talk in terms of their spiritual growth or how they're working in that, because it's not included. And actually that is really dangerous, and it's actually crept into the church. Some churches have become quite moral and try to get rid of the supernatural in order to sort of fit with what the world is saying. And some Christian ministers go around saying they don't believe in angels or miracles or even the Holy Spirit just because their worldview is now shaped by this Western culture, not by the Bible.
And moving from that, we're just going to have a look at a biblical worldview. So a bit of scripture that I want you guys to look at is in the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 2. Later next year, we're going to be looking at this even more in youth on a Friday. But Romans 12, verse 2 says, do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, perfect will. Having looked through both of those lenses that we've just said about the modern worldview and a non-Western worldview, which do you think shows the world out of those two in the best way? I personally think it's neither of them, because that's not my worldview. Some people it is, but for me it's not. When we become Christians, we need to take off the glasses that culture has given us and learn to look at the world for what it really is, how God sees it, and adopt what you might call the biblical worldview. Although we can be given a hard time saying this in our postmodern world, according to the Bible, truth really does exist. In fact, it teaches that God is truth. What a lot of people seem to miss, though, is that faith and logic actually work together. Logic shows that truth exists. Just think about that really important question that within all of these worldviews people ask, which is, what happens when we die?
Yeah, so when we think about that question, what happens when we die, we can have lots of different answers, and different religions and worldviews have different answers for that question. So if you're a Hindu, you might believe that when your soul dies, you're reincarnated in another form, depending on how good or bad you were during this life. If you're a Christian, then we talk about final judgment and your soul spending time in either heaven or hell. If you're an atheist, then you might believe that when you die, that's just it. Existence just ends. There's nothing. It's just gone. And postmodernism says it doesn't really matter what you believe, as long as you don't upset anyone else. All of them can be true to a certain extent, but it's your truth that matters. But when you look at what I've just said, that can't be true. That actually all of those things can't be true at the same time. Logically, you can't go to heaven and be reincarnated into a dragonfly or a blade of grass. You can't be reincarnated, but at the same time have your existence end and there be completely nothing. You can't have the two at the same time. And does what we believe really make a difference to when we die? Well, it can't, because either one thing will happen or it won't. Whatever you believe, at the end of the day, you will come to a point where you die, and then something will happen, and you don't have control of that depending on what you believe. Logic tells us that only one of those things can be true, and so logic proves the existence of truth. And the Bible says God is truth. And therefore truth is independent of human thought. It's absolute and something we can't get rid of because it's found in God's unshakable character.
The biblical worldview has been tested and found reliable by millions of people over thousands of years. It's changed people for the better. It's inspired people to do heroic things like abolishing slavery, helping drug addicts find freedom. It can be tricky to go against the flow by proclaiming that Jesus is the only way to God and that there is only one truth. But at the same time, if we as Christians know that that's truth, how can we not share that? How can we keep quiet about it? So a challenge for you guys this week are some questions that I just want you to have a think about and maybe write down your answers. And they are, what's your worldview? And how can you see that your worldview is being influenced by how you've grown up? How can you decide whether someone's worldview is true or not? And can you think of an example where your friend's worldview clash with a biblical worldview, or even just your own worldview? I'd love you guys to spend some time this week journaling. I want you to talk to a friend and journal about your worldviews. Find where the differences are and find where there's similarities and see what crosses over and just work on that. Find your own worldview and find a biblical stance that you can stand on and see the world in. And then a question for you guys to think about for next week is, if you know that you are a saint, why do you think that we often still mess up in life? Just think about that, and yeah, Owen and I will discuss it next week. But yeah, for now, we hope you have a good rest of the week.
Thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you on Zoom on Friday if you join us. And yeah, peace out.